Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Jagdip Jagpal, who is our moderator for the evening.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us this evening for TAP Talk. And before I introduce our speakers, let me tell you a little bit about the art platform India, otherwise known as TAP. Some of you may already know, but for those of you who don't, TAP India is a collective platform. Formed last year during the COVID lockdowns, it brings together 15 galleries from across India who, through advocacy and collaboration, generate visibility for South Asian art, as well as explore new markets and open private doors to conversations. And TAP Talk is the learning discussion arm of TAP India. Tonight's conversation, I'm delighted to say, is with collector and arts patron Smita Prabhakar. Let me tell you a little bit about Smita. She's the founder and chairperson of the Ishara Art Foundation, a non-profit organization founded in 2019, dedicated to presenting contemporary art of South Asia. She has lived and worked in Dubai for over 40 years. An avid collector and patron of contemporary art, she also sits on the advisory board of Art Dubai, is a member of the South Asian Acquisitions Committee at Tate Modern in London, and an international patron of the Guggenheim Museum in New York. This evening, she is joined by Sabih Ahmed. He is Associate Director and Curator at Ishara. He was formerly Senior Researcher at Asia Art Archive, where he led the organization's research initiatives for modern and contemporary art in India from 2009 to 2019. He's an experienced writer and has served as he's an experienced writer and curator who was a curatorial collegiate member of the 11th Shanghai Biennale in 2016 that was curated by Rux Media Collective. He has served as a visiting faculty member in Ambedkar University School of Culture and Creative Expression, Delhi from 2014 to 2019. His recent writings have been published by the Moose Publications, the Whitworth, and On Curating, and he is on the advisory board of the Sher Gil Sundram Arts Foundation in Delhi. So before I invite Sabih to give a presentation about Ishara Art Foundation and some of the exhibitions that have taken place there, is just a quick reminder to everybody to switch off their mobile phones or to also mute their microphones when they're not speaking. After Sabih's presentation, which will last about 20 minutes, we'll have the delightful honor of being able to talk to Smita and ask her some questions, and we'll take it from there. So Sabih, may I invite you to talk to us about the exhibitions that have taken place at the foundation.
Hello. Hi, thank you, Jagdeep, and thank you everyone at TAP India for this invitation. It's really a pleasure sharing with all of you what we've done at Ishara Art Foundation in the past couple of years. We turned 2 years old recently, so it's also a way to celebrate what all we've been doing. So I'm just trying to set up this. My name is Sabih, as I've been introduced by Jagdeep. I am the Associate Director and Curator at Ishara Art Foundation. Sorry, just 1 second. This is a little bit. All right. So, okay, I'm back on. So as Jagdeep mentioned, I'm going to be making a presentation for 20 minutes. And just to give you a quick layout of what I'll be speaking about, my presentation is divided into 2 parts. The first part is going to be about Ishara Art Foundation, what all we've been doing for the past 2 years, and what all we have lined up. The second part of my presentation will bring up a few highlights from Smita's collection, and we're going to talk about the relationship between the collection and the institution. And to begin with, I want to speak a little bit about Ishara Art Foundation for those of you who don't know. We're a non-profit art space situated in Dubai. We were founded in 2019. We're dedicated to presenting contemporary art from South Asia. But we also don't want to talk about contemporary art from South Asia as if it's an existing category. We want to complicate the category. The logo of Ishara Art Foundation that you see on the screen right now is in fact taken from an artwork by Zarina Hashmi, an artist we greatly admire, an artist who has been substantially collected by Smita in her private collection. The work from which this image comes is called Home is a Foreign Place. It was made in 1999, and it forms 36 different ideograms. And this is an ideogram representing the sky, Asman. And it's practically the image of a sky that presents itself from a courtyard, the shape of the sky from a courtyard. And I think it's a beautiful representation of how the shape of the sky looks from different places that you stand and view the world. And Ishara, I think, in that sense, is about looking at geographies, looking at the sky from different positions. Now, just to add a little bit about the founder of Ishara, Smita, who is with us this evening, founded it in 2019. She has been based in the UAE for over 40 years, as Jagdip mentioned, and she's made UAE her second home, just like thousands of people who have made the UAE their second home. And the idea of the home is quite integral to Ishara, because we're all living in a time when the idea of a home is much more complicated than we used to think it is. It is everyone having multiple homes, or sometimes not having homes, especially as accentuated in times like these. So we have to reimagine the idea of home. And Smita herself imagining 2 homes and many more homes. I think some of those will be touched on in the presentation and in the Q&A. Then talks about some of the issues that here at Ishara that are quite central to us. We want to talk about the world through very complex geographies, and especially in a place which has so many different people from so many different places coming here, spending time here, making this a home, and imagining the world from this location. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what all we aim to do at Ishara and what all we've been doing in the past 2 years. Broadly, our exhibitions have been the spine of Ishara. We have 2 exhibitions a year. I will be making a presentation showing you the exhibitions that we've done. But alongside exhibitions, we've also been looking at programs so that there's dialogue and activations of not just the exhibitions, but the ideas that the artists are invested in. Over the past year, we've been thinking very seriously also about Ishara being a space of resources. And what do I mean by that? Based on our web presence, based on the physical space here, we want to and we aspire for having a reading space. We aspire to having conversations and programs that you can refer to online. We aim to commission more artist texts so that you can read more about artists in their own voices. We have an online platform since we were founded and has been recently updated, where we have a section called Ishara Online. You can visit our website and find content there. We connect with universities, we collaborate with other art institutions, museums, art foundations, in order to form an ecosystem or be part of an ecosystem. And of course, there's the side of the collection that you see in this slide, which every now and then presents itself in Ishara, but also finds a place in other exhibitions that are going on around the world. So just to give you a quick timeline of the exhibitions that we've done and also show what kinds of ideas we've been exploring. We've had 5 exhibitions so far, starting with Altered Inheritances, Home is a Foreign Place, that was curated by the former artistic director of Ishara, Nada Raza. This exhibition, I will be showing you slides, featured artists Zarina Hashmi and Shilpa Gupta, and looked at ideas central to their practice, but also central to Ishara, talking about the home, as I mentioned early in the presentation. We also had an exhibition, again curated by Nada, called Bodybuilding, which was looking at the ideas of how bodies are perceived, constructed, and how cityscapes are also imagined across South Asia and the Gulf. Making interesting intersections, both visually as well as metaphorically. And then following Bodybuilding, we had an exhibition featuring Amar Kanwar's project that inaugurated at the Documenta called Such a Morning. It was a privilege showing this project for the first time in the Gulf. It was a privilege showing this project in a setting which we hope did justice, and thankfully Amar himself had said that he really enjoyed making the presentation here at Ishara. This was followed by a collection-based exhibition titled Every Soiled Page, that was inspired from the poems of Faiz Ahmad Faiz and drew from the collection of Smita. I will be showing pictures like I mentioned. And then we have an exhibition that is currently ongoing titled Growing Like a Tree, which I will also talk about, and in which we invited artist and filmmaker Sohrab Hura to curate. So just taking you through the space and the ideas that we've had going on in the foundation. One thing I really enjoy about the foundation is that the space transforms with every exhibition. It's almost like like a hermit crab that moves from one shell into another. Every exhibition moves from one shell into another, and the exhibition space is therefore quite agile. This is something I really appreciate about art foundations and independent spaces, having worked with many in the past years, that actually, especially in times like these, where sometimes you feel like in museums, these are large ships with small rudders. It takes years for them to change course, change direction, and rightfully so, because they've built legacies. They determine the shape of art history. But also they're commercial galleries, which end up showing artworks that can be bought, that can be circulated at a much quicker pace. And then, of course, you have biennales, you have alternative art exhibitions, smaller spaces, and somewhere in between is where I think Ishara is positioned, where we are able to present exhibitions that are agile, that respond to the current moment, that can experiment with ideas, and yet have a museum grade presentation. So that I hope that sometimes when museums look at us, they feel, oh, we should be considering something like this too. And in art spaces where we can also encourage emerging practices to be presented. Altered Inheritances, Home is a Foreign Place presented works by Shilpa Gupta and Zarina Hashmi, two artists from different generations. Zarina, as you know, was born in 1937 in Aligarh, has moved between cities that include New York, Tokyo, London, and is someone who is truly cosmopolitan, and presenting her works in this exhibition was a way to also show the generational shifts in which the idea of inhabiting the world have transformed over the years, and looking at practices of artists such as her really inspire new ways of thinking. The exhibition was designed almost as a home, a map or a layout of a home. I was talking about the architectural layout of Ishara Art Foundation. We transform every time. And the first exhibition really set the pace of what all is possible here in the UAE and here in Ishara. The second exhibition, Bodybuilding, was also curated by Nada and featured 19 artists from South Asia, and all of whom have been looking at the idea of cityscapes, the city body, the social body, the human body in all of its representational schemas. It featured established artists such as Dainita Singh, Ram Rahman, Vivek Vilasini, as well as emerging ones such as Ambar Majid, who you're seeing over here. Followed by the exhibition that presented Amar Kanwar's Such a Morning. The foundation turned practically into a theater where we were able to present his film. We had a lovely group of visitors coming regularly. And this exhibition was done in collaboration with New York University, Abu Dhabi, where Amar was presenting Sovereign Forest. So this was already a starting of our collaborations, our affiliations with educational institutions, as well as with multiple kind of places and bodies here in the UAE. The exhibition featured his letters installed beautifully in one of our gallery spaces. For those who've seen this project in Documenta, there was a separation. It comes together here and was really, I mean, I, for the first time, had seen it like this and was really, really astonished at what an amazing work this was. Then coming to our fourth exhibition, Growing Like Every Soiled Page, which was a poem by Faiz Ahmed Faiz, a verse from a poem by Faiz. And this is a work by Praneet Soy, Olive Tree. We might touch on olive trees in this talk today because of Smita's own preference and actually inspiration that she draws from trees. She actually has an olive tree that she's really looked after in her own personal garden that is, if I'm not wrong, 300 years old. This is a tree that Praneet Soy had made during his visits to Jerusalem. It's one of the oldest olive trees in the world, called Al-Badawi, which means the Bedouin, quite rightfully so, because one might think that a tree has stood in the same place for many centuries. It has also traveled and journeyed across different civilizations through famines, through joys and terrors. And a tree like this depicted through an artist's travel was something quite precious to have in the collection. And we made this as the opening of Every Soiled Page exhibition. The exhibition featured works by Neha Choksi, who's based in the US, by Sunil Padwal, who's based in Mumbai, by Inder Salim, who's based in Delhi, Asta Butail, who's based in Bangalore, and Gurgaon, and Anju Dodia, who is also based in Mumbai. And this was only a thin slice of Smita's collection, showing some of the ideas that inspire her, but also that inspire the foundation. Work by Sunil Padwal, an assemblage of different found frames. He collects and salvages old frames. I wish I could talk more about the work, but in the interest of time, I'm going to stop and move to our current exhibition. This is Neha Choksi's Touching Integrity series, and Judoria's works. Asta Batail's installation. As you can see, this exhibition is shaped so differently from the previous exhibitions. Then coming to the current and ongoing exhibition that is curated by Sohrab Hura, it's titled Growing Like a Tree. It presents works by 14 artists, some of whom have never shown before at all, and some of whom are showing for the first time in this part of the world. This is Sohrab's debut curation, which has been a privilege to work with him together, and in which he's explored the idea of collective journeys that he's sharing with various practitioners from around the world. And for Ishara, this becomes really exciting because through this exhibition, we complicate the idea of South Asia even further, because it's not just presenting works by artists from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, but also Cambodia, also Myanmar, also Singapore, Germany, and Australia. And that becomes a really interesting way to think about what are the maps that artists are drawing, that artist practices are drawing. And those maps might not be very different from the maps that many, many people today in the contemporary moment are drawing because of where work takes them or where circumstances take them. The way we connect with places is much more complicated than only where we come from. And I think exhibitions at Ishara aspire to communicate some of these ideas through some brilliant artist practices. This is a work by Satish Kumar, someone who, while our exhibition is going on, has also recently been awarded a grant from Serendipity Arts Festival in Arles and is showing in many places. Munim Wasif, in the black and white projection that you see, Sarkar Pratik, both of whom in fact were curators of the Chobi Mela in this edition in Dhaka. The exhibition brings the various relationships that artists share with one another that might be fragile, but still very resilient. And the TV screens at the back are works by Katrin Koning from Germany. So Chobi Mela this time, in fact, invited Sohrab and myself to do a podcast talking about ideas of the image in the 21st century, but also talking about Ishara Foundation's ongoing exhibition. So if any of you are interested in getting more details or information about the ideas behind this show, you could go to Chobi Mela's website and check out the podcast there. Then to quickly come to the Prabhakar collection, I'm going to show 5 highlights just to give you an idea of the kinds of interest that the Prabhakar collection kind of explores. I should add that the Prabhakar collection and Ishara Art Foundation are tied together in interesting ways, but not necessarily one overlapping with the other. In fact, one informs the other. And Smita's collection and the ideas that she has with regard to how to collect further are sometimes informed by Ishara's strategy and vice versa. One of the works that I mentioned right in the beginning, Home is a Foreign Place, that was made in 1999. You can see Ishara's logo right up there. In the grid that you see. It's a beautiful artwork, a print. I should add that a number of works in Smita's collection seem to lean towards paperworks, towards print. And I personally connect to this as well, the relationship of writing and making art, the relationship of text and art, the relationship of reading and seeing are recurring themes I find in Smita's collection. And paperwork seem to occupy an important place, not because they are smaller or more intimate, but also because they have a quality of their own that I think deserves much more attention than it already does. A work by Shilpa Gupta that was also shown in the first exhibition. And this is a work that in fact is also going to be traveling soon to a museum where Shilpa's solo exhibition will be presented over the summer in Antwerp at the MUCA. It's called Altered Inheritances, 100 Last Name Stories, a beautiful installation. So while it is a photographic or print-based work, it is installed. And I think that's some of the areas that Smita's collection also seems to push towards, where existing mediums push the boundary. Smita also has in her collection recently acquired Myself Mona Ahmed, probably one of the most seminal works produced in the last few decades in South Asia by artist Dainita Singh. It's 21 silver gelatin prints that outline a very intimate relationship that Dainita had with Mona Ahmed. A photographic series that I hope will see more, will be shown more and more around the world. It exists just like all of Dainita's projects. It exists in the form of a book, but also a photographic series. And I'm sure it will keep finding new and new forms, which is something that excites us too. Just like Ishara keeps shape-shifting, artist practices keep shape-shifting. And we hope that we'll see many more versions of some of these works. Simran Gill, an artist who was born in 1959, born in Singapore, grew up in Malaysia, was educated in India, is currently based in Australia, talking about multiple homes, talking about movement, migration, travels that is central to her practice, talking about the fragile but also tenacious relationship between text and images, between reading and seeing. Her works capture this beautifully in Forest that was made between 1996 and 1998. These 16 large silver gelatin prints capture a beautiful density of what surrounds us. As you can see, besides paperwork, there's quite a lot of photographic works also, lens-based work, and also lens-based work that pushes the envelope a little bit in the form of installations, sets, interesting and challenging themes. We have Jitish Kalat's flowchart that was made in 2015, mixed media drawings. I personally love how Jitish brings together the molecular level, the microscopic level, and the cosmic level of observations into one space. Again, thinking about where do we locate ourselves at a molecular biological level, but also at a cosmic astronomical level. This work shows some of those geometric patterns as well that are both in our everyday surroundings as well as beyond us in the cosmos. We in fact have Jitish Kalat's exhibition, a solo presentation coming up early next year in January 2022, which we're very excited about presenting. Then coming to a work that is the finale of my presentation, primarily because with this work, we're also expanding the collection from South Asian contemporary art, from Indian contemporary art to South Asian contemporary art. And this is a work by an artist we greatly admire, Lala Rukh, who was born in 1948, more or less the same generation as Zarina Hashmi. And this is a work titled Hieroglyph that was made in 2010. Lala has produced a limited body of work, but an exquisite body of work that somewhere touches on her relationship with the sea, with fluid borders, with boundaries that are constantly shimmering. And water bodies seem to be a recurring theme in her work alongside music. Her works were presented in the Documenta. They have been also part of important collections, and we at Ishara are very proud that Smita has has had the foresight of looking at Lala works in a comprehensive way for the collection. And I hope that here at Ishara we'll have the chance to be presenting it in the UAE, as well as have the opportunity of sharing it with the rest of the world elsewhere. So on that note, I'm going to conclude my presentation and hand it over to Jagdip, who can then ask more questions about the collection, about Ishara, and over to you, Jagdip. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sabih. Thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive presentation. So Smita, I think a good place to start would be using the title of Zarina's work, Home is a Foreign Place. Right. Where do you consider to be home? And where are you from?
I'm actually from UP, Lucknow and Bareilly, if you could say the heartland of India. But if you ask me what I consider home, I would say Dubai is my home. It is where I've lived for 40 years. It's the place which has given me all the opportunities to grow as a person in so many ways that, you know, it would be a story to tell. If I was to say to you that I've been able to function as a woman, I've been able to function as a businesswoman, have an art collection, set up a foundation, and be part of society, an international society, which is a very rare experience that one has. I don't think I would have had the understanding of all this, of all the different cultures that I have living in Dubai. So yes, I consider Dubai my home.
Okay. So Sabih was talking to us about some of the exhibitions that have taken place at the foundation in Al Sakal Avenue. He also
Yes.
talked about the Prabhakar collection. And
Yes.
so I just wondered, how you see your role as a patron. At what point did your mind move from being a collector to being somebody who is, starting an institution? Because there's an intellectual or some kind of emotional shift that happens. I mean, you tell us.
Yes, it does. Because firstly, you have to kind of be more emotional, but yet less in some ways. How did the shift happen? I think it was about the fact that I realized that we as South Asians form a very large part of the community. uh, we are very hesitant and reticent in our approach to talking about our culture, about what has made us the people that we are. I'm very proud to be South Asian. I'm very proud to be Indian, both of which, and I'm also proud to be a person who considers UAE their home. So it's a bit complex, if I could say, But the transition started about 4 years ago, and I was Richard Armstrong, my good friend, who is also the chairman of the advisory board, was visiting. And I said to him, Richard, this is what I would like to do. And he said, you must give it a lot of thought because it's going to take up a lot of your time. It's going to put you in the public sphere. Do you want to be there? And it's going to be a big responsibility, but it is something the region requires, because really there is no space or no body dedicated to the promotion of South Asian art, which I feel is truly international, but for some reason continues to be in that box of South Asian. So for example, if you look at the shows, Amar's show, Amar is an international filmmaker. His nationality is Indian, is by and by. Zarina is an international printmaker. She's an outstanding printmaker who would compete at any level with any printmaker, right? Shilpa is a conceptual artist of the most outstanding stature. So whether they are Indians, they could be Indians, Pakistanis, they could be Brazilians, they could be from Tonga. It wouldn't matter. It's what they're bringing to the table of art, which I felt that, I actually feel that Sorab, with his latest show, has really kind of brought it home to me, which is Ishara should be about people who have not shown before. Every third show or every fourth show should be people who have never shown before. It's their introduction to the world outside of where they live. And the world gets to see them. And, will be amazed at the quality. Sabhi and I have done virtual walkthroughs for the Guggenheim, for the Tate, for MoMA, for MCA Chicago. I mean, the response to the shows, to both Every Soiled Page and Growing Like a Tree, has been phenomenal. And so, in effect, we've taken Ishara to the world. The world hasn't been able to come visit us, but there's not a continent that we haven't explored and are continuing to explore. So that's where we are at, if I could say,
Yeah, it's an uphill struggle getting recognition for the quality and the dynamic, art that we have in our region.
Yes.
Putting that, and you can't expect the international community to do that because they haven't done it so far. So it's on us and on people like you, which is why I can understand Richard Armstrong told you to think long and hard before you made a decision, because it's a big commitment. And following on from that, then, you've said a little bit about your vision for the foundation, which is great to hear you'd be so passionate about it. So, what is the imprint that you want to create or leave? I noticed that we've talked about a lot of female artists, and I know your first show was it Shilpa and Zarina, Dianita Asta, Simran Gill, and various. I mean, what is the imprint that you would like to leave with this foundation or create, which is when people think about Ishara? I mean, you mentioned also about how showing new work and artists who haven't shown before on a regular basis. Is there a couple of headlines that you could give us about when you think about your vision for Ishara for the future and how you're going to build to it? You also mentioned, I think Sabih mentioned, that you wanted to expand from Indian contemporary art to more South Asian art, and you've mentioned that yourself. You see yourself as somebody who's Indian who lives in Dubai, but you're very proud to be South Asian.
Yeah, I think looking to the future is a tall task, if I could say, because I think one step at a time. We are 5 shows old. We are, whether we like it or not, 2 years old. This March we hit our 2-year mark. I think it would be presumptuous and pompous of me to say that in 10 years' time I want Ishara to be this or that. I think what we need to do in the moment and for the moment is to actually create a platform where we are able to showcase the best that South Asia has to offer. Be able to ask people, artists like Sorab, what a delightful young man, or us, or to come and make a presentation of what he thinks is his concept of photography, but via his life, not a random 2 staircases here, 3 flowers there, and a house here. But actually, each person in that show is actually connected to him in some way. That connect and all the people in my collection are also now connected to me in some way. As you know, Sabih spoke about that tree, that olive tree. That work of Praneeth Soi appealed to me so very much, because in our house, in growing trees in the desert is one of the most difficult things you can do, because the soil does not give you back the strength that you and I take for granted in India and South Asia, right? So every tree has a name. My olive tree is called Caesar, and it's very much the same with artists and their works. We become like one big family, and we take. I know Sabih often teases me about this Caesar and this and that, but the point of the matter remains that we are all, like it. We are all in a bowl, and all this khichdi is being made nicely and roundly, and it will come out, because ultimately at the end of the day, khichdi is about the best you get in our food. Everything said and done, that's what I want to eat every day if I could. So that's where we are going to, if I could say. Yes, obviously I would like to have grand visions about, we would like to have many more collaborations. We'd like to see many more international visitors. I would like all of Dubai to come and see us when they have a day off, and instead of going to a mall, they could come to, I would like them to think of us, since we are free, to think of us as the alternative. Come to Al Sarkal Avenue, have a day out, like we used to go when we were in university, go to NGMA or somewhere else. Dubai is also growing. There's a huge university campus. We're getting more and more young people. Those are the people I want to entice somehow to come and see our space.
Well, I can imagine after what we've seen that there'll be a very interesting response, actually, to once people learn more about the foundation, about the exhibitions taking place. Sabih, you mentioned earlier that about the type of works that were in the collection and the works that are being shown in Smita's collection in particular, that works on paper and these different mediums. Do you want to say a little bit more about that so we can have more of a picture of just the range of the Prabhakar collection?
Absolutely. So with the hope not to misrepresent while Smita's here, we have been doing extensive research since I arrived a year ago to Ishara. We go over so many artists' websites. In fact, it's really astonishing how many artists Smita is in direct touch with herself. independent of my communication with them. And they share images of works, what they're writing, things that are published on them. And this research informs so many of my discussions with Smita. And to be very honest, I'm sharing this for the first time. When Smita and I had the first conversation before I even joined Smita, I was asking how closely connected are Ishara and the collection. And Smita said, they're two separate things. The collection is my private life. It's my private journey with contemporary art. And the foundation is about sharing the broad ideas of South Asia with the world. And so as I've come in, I'm just astonished and so happy to be in so much conversation with Smita about the collection as well. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to focus on the foundation. Smita's collection is going to be side conversation, but they both happen hand in hand. And the collection that Smita's been building has had certain strands which have excited me tremendously. You mentioned, Jagdip, a number of important and strong women who are foundational to the collection. I think that's something that has excited and inspired me enormously. I've had those questions about art history since I was a student. Why are so many interesting artists not adequately represented? And in Smita's collection, they find the support. They're there with some of the seminal key works. I mentioned Dainita Singh, I mentioned Simran Gill, I mentioned recently Lala Rukh. They're all present in the collection. Shiba Chachi as well. So that's one area I think that the collection really stands quite uniquely. And then the works that I mentioned earlier about being on paper, being print, being photographic, but pushing the boundaries of those mediums, not as if how art history is considered drawing to be subsidiary to painting, but in fact, works by artists that take paper as the primary medium. And I think these are part of a shift that are happening in contemporary art. It's not incidental that the works on paper, works on print are taking such a foreground. It's because artists are testing multiple mediums. No one identifies himself with just one medium. They're not just painters, they're not just sculptors. And so you've seen the collection a variety of media, but especially much more an experiment with media. Dainita Singh's montage that is in the collection is not just a photographic work, but an intersection of art, photography and architecture. So these are the kind of areas that I think Smita's collection really stands out. And some of them, of course, are based on conversations she and I have together, some of them based on research that she independently does. And I also learn from. And here at the foundation, I think we're constantly having our minds ticking as to what kind of exhibition will make sense where we can present works from the collection as well. Besides, of course, loaning Smita's collection works to important museum shows, important art exhibitions globally.
You listen to Smita speak, and you can tell how proud she is of her roots and how passionate she is about promoting South Asian artists in the international context. In Dubai, there is a very large South Asian working population. And around the world, people do struggle to find audiences amongst working groups or different groups where people don't get used to visiting art exhibitions or museums, etc., as youngsters. And so it's a large working population. How do you hope to try and find, to at some point be able to engage that working population to say, come here and look and be proud of what you can see here, so that you can stand as tall as everybody else who lives and works here or is white. How do you kind of, I know it's a difficult task because it's always been a difficult one, but how will you kind of look a bit more to the community? We talked about children, starting people at a certain age, making sure people exist in the first place.
Jagdip,
sorry, Sabih, if I could interrupt.
Please, absolutely.
You said, what's my mission for the years to come? I would say that would be a mission, because that is what we want to do. And I'll let Sabih detail more because he's a better speaker than I am.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
And clearer than I am. So he'll do a better job of it. But really, Sabih, go ahead.
You're too humble. Smita, are you sure you don't want to say more? Because I mean, listen, you spent decades here. There's a relationship you have with the place. Okay, I'll just answer very briefly, and then Smita hopefully can come in. Yeah. What I wanted to say was, there's often this discussion about audience building, attracting audiences, and it's a very abstract idea of what an audience is. People occupy various different spaces. They're having different conversations at different stages in their life. Smita mentioned a number of universities that are in the UAE. So instead of looking at a broad idea of an audience, we look at specific areas where different kinds of conversations take the foreground. So on the one hand, we reach out to universities here in the UAE, either in the form of presenting guest lectures, inviting them over to the foundation to have discussions, roundtables, or circular discussion, well, not tables anymore, but circular discussions. Then we also reach out through conversations and I mean, if I can add even personal conversations I have, say, with cab drivers. I remember working in Shanghai and how important the cab drivers were in informing you what all is going on in the city. And in fact, I remember a conversation with a cab driver in Shanghai who talked about how, this was during the Shanghai Biennale, how the cab driver made his 7-year-old and 9-year-old children listen to audiobooks on science fiction on their way to school. And this was to improve their language, because language is changing in the future and sci-fi is a future kind of language. So it's so curious of the kinds of ways people inhabit the world. So talking to cab drivers, talking to universities, talking to people in the art field, there's so many different communities here in the UAE which form community groups. There are photography groups, there are art groups, there are motorbike groups, there are community development groups. So there are all of those kind of pockets as well. And we try and reach out to each of them with specific areas of interest, not as if we have one message for everyone. We have different messages for each one. And then we hope to invite them in so that they can take something away experientially as opposed to just in a flat way.
Thank you. Just on that, we've been talking about the future, and we know that Saurabh Hura's exhibition is on at the moment. Are you able to give some insight into what will be coming up next, or if you have some plans formed for the next 2 exhibitions? Or?
Smita, do you want to add anything? Or
on your note, yes, I think
yes.
What I wanted to say was, I think what we have to do, and we are getting some very good coverage in the local press, especially in the English press, which is read by a lot of, as you put it, from the people from South Asia. And I think what we have to do is make art not so difficult to enter. I think what most people are is they're afraid of entering because they think it's something I don't understand. But they don't. But people don't realize that if they just come into Ishara. So I think if you look at Saurabh's show, it's a very simple show. It's very simple. It's as simple as you want it to be, or as complex as you desire it to be. And if we are trying to, therefore, once it gets covered, and there's a huge photography community which is made up of South Asian expats, if we can get them in, if we can, we've been a bit restricted.
And we have been.
Because, yeah, government regulations don't allow us to have too many groups in. But if the schools had been open, we had already approached a lot of the South Asian schools to send their senior grade students to come in and see the show. I think once things open up a bit, we will be able to. I think everybody is now very much aware of where we are, what we do, and it is accessible, it's free. So it's like going to the mall and having a walk around. You don't pay anything, because and once I think they lose their fear of the fact that it's a gallery. It's I will not understand. What if people think I'm stupid? It's none of these things. It's about viewing pleasure. You like it, you stay for a bit. You don't like it, you go away. The number of times that I walk into Ishara, Jagdeep, and I see people who brought their coffee and their friends and are sitting there on the bench and having a gossip, my greatest day, because it means that they view this place as a place to come to.
Hospitable.
Without,
yes.
Yeah, hospitable, and without any kind of restrictions on them. They can talk, they can gossip, they can yell at each other. There's no such thing as keep quiet, be quiet, do not speak, none of those things. They can do pretty much what they want. So
can I add something, Smita, to
yes.
what you said, which is that I think it's a space which, at least we try to kind of send this message across, that we shouldn't be scared of what we don't understand.
Yeah.
If we don't understand the contemporary artwork, that's practically pretty good, because it's nice to be challenged with what you don't understand. When Okwi Onwuzor was curating the document in 2002, he wrote in a statement, which I can't forget, that the space has to be hospitable to the untested and uncharted present. The present is uncharted, the present is untested, and spaces of art should be hospitable to those uncharted experiences. So you're coming here for that experience, in fact, not to understand everything you know, but to learn something that you can experience through art.
For example, Jagdeep, in this show by Saurabh, I'm only saying this because it's the current show. Saurabh's got these photographs by a young, I think, Nepalese photographer who talks about the stigma of the color red. If you're from Nepal and you're a woman from Nepal, those photographs will speak to you. They spoke to me, and they will speak to anybody who's a woman. So all we have to do is to just get them going. That's it. Once we all get vaccinated and people can come and go as they wish, I think it'll be a breeze.
Yeah.
There won't be a problem on this.
It's we're all looking for returning to the in-person experience during this time and ongoing as well. How important do you feel the social media strategy is, as opposed to creating a virtual gallery or a virtual museum? Because that's how it's a popular way for engaging broader audiences or people who wouldn't otherwise look, because it's accessible and it's free as well. So is there something that you're planning? Or I have to say the Saurabh Hura exhibitions received a lot of coverage on social media. That's where I saw most about it.
Right.
Is there any specific things, because you're a small foundation still,
Yes.
and a small team, and is this something that you're going to do more of, or is this we're talking about making sure that people know that Ishara exists, and what, if somebody has a sense for what a place is about, then they will come, irrespective of the fact that you may have never have heard of the artist and their work.
Smita, do you want to go first?
No,
I will come after. Okay,
go.
I'll quickly answer by saying that I think at Ishara, we're not trying to have the online substitute what is going on here physically. We try to maintain different strategies for what goes online and what stays physical, instead of trying to make the physical virtual and say one can be substituted for the other. So we're designing very specific online content, very specific online programs. For instance, last summer, when the pandemic had broken out, we'd done this series of online conversations with artists titled Alt Shift Studio. And these were emerging artists based in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, who talk about how in the 21st century, and especially with artists where resources are not as robust, you have to reimagine the studio. The studio is not like the Jackson Pollock studio of a large hall where you make paintings. In fact, the studio is distributed in the city through various places, the printing studio, your little room in a home. And these are ideas that were so fundamental also to the pandemic, where you had to rethink the home altogether, where your home became a working place for some. And for some, they had to leave their homes because they lost their jobs. So there was Alt Shift Studio, which was an online designed program. In the coming summer, we're collaborating with Columboscope, that is being curated by Natasha Jinwala and Anushka Rajendran, which will have, on the one hand, a reading room project space in Colombo in Sri Lanka, but also an online component that will be released in the summer. So in terms of social media, in terms of online presence, we want to customize it. And one last thing I want to mention is we're inviting artists, we're commissioning young and emerging artists from our show, sometimes beyond our show, to produce, like I mentioned, new texts, either in the form of interviews or essays or visual essays. And the reason we're interested in doing this is because we should be able to quote some of the beautiful thoughts of artists around us, as opposed to always relying on the Andy Warhol quote or the Paul Klee quote that keeps circulating again and again and again. We want to be having artists from South Asia not as case studies, but rather as voices that then enrich our imagination of the world.
Thank you, Sabih. Smita, can I just ask you, the titles of the shows and also the title of the works that you've purchased are very interesting in the sort of the themes that go through them. And clearly those titles have an impact on you as well as the visual, the emotional impact. You named a tree Caesar. Unless it's very private, can you sort of give us a feel for how you came to do that?
Well, he arrived, and I'm sorry to be talk about him in first person, but he is really a living part of my family. I went to nursery and I saw him, and he was this thing reserved for somebody else. He had a big thread around him, and he was reserved for somebody else. The person who was looking after him was a gentleman from Pakistan. So he said, no, no, please come and I'll show you some more trees. And I went around and I looked at more and I said, really, that's the tree that I want. So he said, why do you like it? I said, I don't know. I just felt an affinity when I stood there. Our hearts were beating as one, and I spoke to him in Hindi, and he was, of course, he thought I was a mad woman who had arrived at his doorstep. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he rang me back 2 days later and he said, I called up the person and I told him that I had another tree and you can have that one. He is absolutely superb, and he's huge. He's 300 years old. He's too old now to bear any fruit, but the magnificence of that tree and is unbelievable. And it every day when I go into the garden and I look at the tree, I go up to him and I tell him I love him very much. It makes me understand that it is trees, the stars at night, my pets, me, we are all part of an ecosystem, which makes life worth living for me. And he makes life worth living for me. If I could give a tree that much importance.
But can I add something to this? Number one, Sohrab had no idea about Smita's tree. So growing like a tree is not connected to Smita's olive tree Caesar. That's number one. Number two, while Smita describes a very intimate space of the ecosystem, I should add that she practically has a personal relationship with so many artists, with so many employees, hundreds of them that work in the company that she founded. And that ecosystem is actually much more beyond just the space of her home that she described. And this is something that we often talk about, even as we conceive exhibitions, talk about projects, talk about even other artists who we should be supporting in either programs or collaborations that we want to do. So that ecosystem, while Smita begins with the tree and the 300-year-old tree that is in her garden, is really sprawling outwards all across. And it's nice to be present in that ecosystem, contributing to it.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Sabih.
I think we're just running up to time now. So I just wondered, Smita, is there anything you would like to add or say to our audience this evening?
No, I would just ask them to come if wherever they are. I'd like them to support us by visiting our website or on our Instagram and Facebook, and really to be very, very proud. All of us, indeed, who come from South Asia, should really be very, very proud of the art and culture that we have. I am, and I'm sure everybody is, we should be very proud of the artistic efforts that artists put in. We should also be, we should try and support the ecosystem that supports the artists, the galleries, the individuals, the people who work for them. And I think once that happens, this sense of belonging, there will come to be a sense of belonging, which if I could help foster it, I would have achieved a dream.
That's fantastic.
I would say that.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Smita.
Thank you.
Sabih, has you got anything that you'd like to add?
I just wanted to add, in fact, in continuation with Smita, that recently there was a talk online where Rux were presenting something about the Yokohama Triennale that they curated. And they made a statement which has really stayed with me, that artists have shown tremendous resilience during the past year and the year of the pandemic. Now it's the institution's turn to show and reciprocate that. Yeah. And I hope we're contributing to that reciprocation of the resilience that artists have shown. And I hope we'll all be able to continue that.
Well, thank you, Sabih, for your contribution. Smita, all I can say is on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for your time and your contribution. It's a real joy. It's a real, you know, heartfelt pleasure to hear somebody who is so proud, so passionate about the art, but also so passionate about audiences and sharing the art and the knowledge with the broadest group as possible. And I can sense your passion through the screen. And I have no doubt that, you know, like Caesar, you will continue to rise. I have to say, thank you very, very much indeed. And I want to also thank our audience this evening because we know people have got busy and they've got things going on. So thank you to everybody for joining us. And I think Smita and Sabih would like to thank you as well before we sign off.
Yes, and I wanted to thank the entire talk team. Thank you, Jagdip, for giving up so much of your time. I know we've had lots of talks, and you know, hope to see you in Dubai soon.
You will. You definitely will. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to hand back now to the TAP team. Thank you very much to the TAP team as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdip, Sabih, and Smita for such a delightful conversation. And thank you, everybody who joined us today. Our next TAP talk will be on Thursday, 8th of April, and we will have Sebastian Cortez in conversation with Rahab Alana. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.